It's a great day here in the fish room, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to be banging myself against these things anymore. These two clamps were holding together the top of my 55-gallon Aqueon tanks. Those tanks have now been replaced by tanks of the exact same dimension, the tanks that are behind me here, from my friends over at GlassCages. It was a big job. I'm actually a little bit exhausted, to tell you the truth. And it had a lot of parts, a lot of things that had to be done, and they had to be done perfectly, or I stood to lose a lot of fish. So the first step was of course getting those tanks drained and able to move them, right? So I had to take all the fish out and put them into a holding tank, someplace that they could be and not be stressed out, but be there comfortably with minimum stress. There's always going to be some stress when you move fish, but I was able to move the fish, the fish that were in the 55, along with as many snails as I could save and plants, were all moved to a 29-gallon that was serving as a quarantine tank. That 29-gallon, the fish in it had gone through a bout of ick, and that had been completely cleaned up for quite some time. And if the tanks hadn't been broken on the top, I would have moved those fish in the 29-gallon to the 55. But instead, I took everything in the 55, all the plants, fish, and snails, and put them into the 29-gallon. To keep the beneficial bacteria that was in the filter alive, I hung that massive Marineland Imperial 400 or what, it's just a massive hang-on back onto that 29-gallon. It looked, you can see, it just looked awkward, almost as wide as the tank, and I had to use pieces of plastic to make sure that the fish wouldn't jump out on me. But the good news is everybody seemed to do okay in there, and I also worked at keeping the substrate alive. The substrate that I wanted to use in the new project, which is the gray pebbles, and I kept that alive by just adding an air stone and some aquarium water. And so any bacteria that was on that substrate, of course the bacteria that wasn't killed from moving it, and which of course always knocks off bacteria, but a lot of it did stay alive. And when it was sitting in that little container, a large number of my pagoda snails of all sizes, mostly the medium and small and very small pagoda snails, came to the surface, and I must have saved, like, I don't know, 25 or 30 of them. The red terror was put into a 29-gallon tank that used to be used as a sump under my 210-gallon. I had that tank sitting around, and I just kept him in there along with some substrate and the beneficial bacteria that was in the internal filter, and that served as it sort of instantly cycled that 29-gallon, and the red terror did fine in there. Then came the hard work. I had to with a friend of mine, John, who's here in Nashville. He came over and he helped me move those move the Aqueon tanks off of the stands, and then this is after draining them, of course, and removing all the substrate. Storing them here in the fish room, they're sitting precariously on top of a piece of furniture, and then moving the probably twice or maybe 3 times as heavy GlassCages tanks onto the stands. The reason the GlassCages tanks are so much heavier, because I moved 55-gallon tanks by myself. You can do it if you can leverage them and balance them, maybe roll them on something. But the reason they're so much heavier is because they're using like twice to 3 times as thick a plate of glass as Aqueon uses, and they frame the bottom with what looks like a euro brace. They frame the bottom with glass just to make it extra strong on the bottom. The tanks are battleships, and the differences are obvious. The thickness of the glass, the reinforcement, and the amount of silicone that ends up being used to hold them together. I think these tanks are going to last for a very, very long time, and are not going to have to go through the traditional, you have to reseal them every 10 years. I don't think that's going to apply to these tanks. The frames, the top and bottom frames on the GlassCages tanks are the same as or very similar to what's on the Aqueon tanks. And that was good news, because I was able to use the same glass lids that I had on the Aqueon tanks, and that saved me some money. One of you, or several of you actually, asked, why didn't I just put a big giant tank behind me and go that route? And the reason is really based on budget. I wanted to be able to reuse a lot of what I already had. That includes the stands, right? The vinyl background that was on the old Aqueon tanks. I was able to peel it off and just attach it to the back of the new tanks. The filtration, the media, the lighting, the decor, all of that was able to be reused in the new project. Now imagine if I had gone with a 300-gallon 7-8 foot tank behind me. I would have had to get everything new. Heaters, controllers, filters, more substrate, perhaps different lights, or maybe use a combination of lights, but still, you get the picture. I estimated that to go to a new tank, when you figure the cost of that new tank and the new stand, I probably would have been in excess of $1,000, and it just wasn't in the budget. So instead, I picked up these two amazing tanks from GlassCages, and then was able to sort of mix and match and repurpose some of the materials that I already have here in the fish room, and create a sort of a new look for each of the tanks. You'll notice in looking at the tanks that I went with a very, very simple look. I just wanted, just something what in my mind which would be a little bit elegant. I pulled some of the wooden plants that were in the 29, and I created a bit of an open swim space on the left that then phases over into a busier green, plant, wood, and pebbles on the right side. Let me know what you think in the comments about that setup. When I first set it up, I was using some of the pink stones that I have in the 90-gallon. But what I ended up doing was replacing those pink stones with one of the zebra stones that I had in the 300-gallon African cichlid tank. I just thought it matched a little bit better. I then took the pink stones and put them inside of the red tear tank. The red tear tank, again, very, very simple, and I just used the sort of black and white aragonite and crushed coral mix that I already had on hand, and was able to, I had enough for the aquarium, and I was able to pull some artificial plants that I had in storage. Never throw anything away if you're a fish keeper. You never know what you're going to use. But I was able to decorate it in a way that didn't provide the red tear with plants that he can tear up, right? Artificial plants that have a bit of a hard base. He's already pulled out one of them and from the substrate, and he's already redecorated the left side of the tank, creating a hole underneath the internal filter, which is fine with me. That just keeps substrate from blocking the intake of that internal filter, which is on the bottom. But you can see it gave him a little bit of a plant cover, because he likes to hide. He feels more confident when he can be behind something. At any rate, I'm no longer going to be bumping into those clamps. I hope I never have to use those clamps again, but I'll tell you, I'm glad I had them, because they gave me a lot more confidence in those Aqueon tanks holding together until I could get the project done. My next step is going to be to use a method that's described in a video that I watched. I'm going to knock off the tops of the old Aqueon tanks and replace the top, the top frame and brace. You can buy those, on the internet. There's a website that sells them for like 15 to 20 bucks. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those two tops, and then what am I going to do with those tanks? I'm not sure. Maybe build some racks and put those two tanks along with some 29s and use those tanks as quarantine hospital tanks and possibly grow out tanks, because there are some hard to find fish that I want to get a hold of, but sometimes you can only find them when they're smaller, and you need to grow them out because when you buy them, they're just too small to put into the tank with the big boys. A good example of that is our friend Whip is going to be bringing over a female red tear. Absolutely gorgeous fish. If you haven't seen one, look them up. And that fish cannot go into the 300 or really any of the larger fish tanks right now because she's too small. So I'm going to grow her out, let her put on some size, a little bit of width, maybe put her into the 210 after quarantine, see how she does there. And then eventually using a divider at first, and then gradually introducing her to the male red tear, and maybe the two of them will get together and and produce some little red tear fry. So we'll see where that goes. But at any rate, hallelujah, this task is done, and now on to new tasks like replacing the tops on the old 55s, getting the 60-gallon acrylic into the mix, and perhaps moving forward with my discus tank project in the 90-gallon over here to my left. So thank you so much for hanging in there. Any comments, tips, ideas, share them below. We all learn from each other here. I'm always anxious to listen and read what you have to say. And there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if you like the channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell. And if you would like to support the channel, consider becoming a Patreon monthly supporter. Starts for as little as $3 a month. And I'll put a video that talks about it up here. And otherwise, I'll see you on Saturday for the Cichlids and Coffee live stream, 1 hour every Saturday at 11 a.m. Central. Great group of fish keepers get together and talk about everything related to fish keeping. All right, thank you, my friends. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.